Hello, it's Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, shooting from the Lugnuts facility with Aidan Goss shooting the video. Before me here we have a 2021 Subaru WRX Sport. But I do remember the launch of the Subaru and the blue Imprezas with the cigarette advertising 555 and Colin McRae. Either winning or crashing in equal measure, and that, of course, and that's where the Subaru STIs and the WRX were born with that. So a WRX is positioned in the same place in the market as Toyota Camrys and Honda Accords, but it's unique in that it's an enthusiast car. And it gives you uniquely a boxer engine with a fairly roarty feel and exhaust note, and it gives you full-time four-wheel drive, and it gives you quite a bit more power than you'd get with the equivalent Honda or Toyota. It appeals to somebody who needs the space, a four-door sedan, but is still a driving enthusiast. So with the highly bolstered seats and the performance rubber and all of the different ways you can configure the instrumentation, etc., it's a very sporty machine, and the chassis is quite stiff, and it's fun. It handles well. It's fun to throw around. Like, it really is an enthusiast car, and unique in the sub $40,000 market. Okay, so for the family guy, when you need to put your child seat in the car but you still want to have fun when you're driving, the WRX is an excellent choice and terrific value. It's also, as a second car, it makes a fantastic winter car. So we have this model in various guises. We have two gearboxes. We have a 6-speed manual, and we have something called a Subaru Performance gearbox, which is a CVT. More on that later. Okay. There was different trim levels of the Impreza you could get, and they're different from Canada in the US. In Canada, we got a base, a Sport Tech, and then an STI. So this car has the 2-liter horizontally opposed 4-cylinder boxer type engine with, I believe, 268 horsepower. It has the Subaru Performance gearbox, which is well matched to the use and the engine and the four-wheel drive system, and works great. Full-time four-wheel drive. This is a Sport, so it's not the base model, but the one above the base level. So the Sport gives you 17-inch wheels, 235/40 17s, and they're shod with sticky Dunlop Sport Max rubber. Okay, so this is a proper performance setup. So the Sport Tech gives you the larger Brembo brakes, but they're also more expensive to replace. So many people will, I think, prefer the stock brakes just on a cost basis, and also the 17-inch rims or 17-inch tires are less costly to replace than the 18s on the higher trim level. Okay, so those are some practical considerations. Getting in the car, we have fabric interior with a technical fabric and Alcantara. We have nicely bolstered front seats, and we have a whole suite of graphics, selectable graphics on the top screen, which we can flash some photographs for you, which gives you readouts from everything from the usual, trip meter and so on, but also a lot of performance stuff as well, like torque split with the four wheels and G-loading and so forth. Okay. And we can see that it's got two cameras that are facing forward on the inside of the front windscreen, and it'll have short and long range radar behind the front bumper, and then radar in the rear bumper. So the cameras combined with the radar, that gives you pedestrian detection emergency braking, alerts when you're closing on a vehicle too fast, okay, including braking the car to a complete stop if something runs out in front. The cameras in the windscreen will also read the white lines and give you lane guidance and lane departure warning. And the radar in the rear bumper, that gives you blind spot monitoring, and you have a little LED in the mirror to indicate when somebody's in the blind spot. Okay. So in the back we have, you know, a really roomy vehicle. Certainly, if you have kids and kids' seats, there's lots of room for that, and the trunk is really large as well. So. About this transmission, it's a CVT. The reason Subaru calls it a Subaru Performance transmission instead of a CVT is because a CVT has, you know, some perhaps not enthusiast connotations with it. So the people who know what a CVT is, or know a little bit about a CVT, will associate it with cars like a Toyota Prius. People with longer memories might remember it from the daffodil in the in the 60s. It was the 60s. It was the first car to use a CVT transmission. So what this is basically two cones, or cross section of cones with different diameters, and then a belt that runs between the cones, and the cones can go in and out and changing the ratio of the gearbox, and the belt then moves alongside these cones to choose an infinite amount of, an infinite number of gear ratios. The CVT has a couple of important advantages. Because it has an infinite number of ratios that it can choose from, it can choose the one ratio that's the most efficient. For instance, if the car produces peak horsepower at 6,000 RPM, it can keep the gearbox at exactly 6,000 RPM and then change the ratios as the car accelerates. So keeping the engine at its absolute peak power. Or it could keep it at its peak torque. Also, internal combustion engines are inherently inefficient in any case, but they're particularly inefficient in some situations. For instance, partial throttle at high RPM is not very efficient at all for an internal combustion engine. Turns out that wide open throttle at low RPM has the best efficiency. If you have to choose 5, 6, or 7 ratios in a gearbox, you're never going to be, or at least very briefly, in the right ratio for the RPM and the throttle opening that you have. The efficiency of the engine is going to be a combination of RPM and throttle opening. So if you have a CVT gearbox and you have an intelligent processor, you can read those two variables, RPM and throttle opening, and then you can choose the exact ratio that makes sense for the car. So in theory, it's a much more efficient gearbox than a manual gearbox or a PDK or a conventional automatic transmission. There's still a direct drive between the engine and the wheels. There's no slip like in a conventional automatic transmission, okay? So it's got that in common with a gearbox with gears in it, like a conventional gearbox or a double clutch. It's just that those ratios can vary. Okay, so in the past, the CVT gearboxes have been limited by the amount of torque that they can transmit from the engine to the wheels, and so they've been limited to low power cars, usually economy cars. My Prius has a CVT. It's only got 110 horsepower. So you haven't seen in the past CVTs on more powerful cars because of the limitation of torque. So Subaru's worked through that, and they've got a beefier design with a metal belt and so on that can handle the power of the car. The other disadvantage that a CVT has is that putting the engine at 1 RPM, which is the most efficient, by the way. They even banned it in F1 because otherwise the entire F1 grid would have a CVT because it is inherently more efficient. And if you can just run the engine at 1 RPM, you can tune an engine with a lot more precisely to run at exactly that RPM. So there are advantages that even have got not unnoticed by the race car engineers for Formula One racing. Okay, but that constant engine note, maybe isn't that satisfying. And people are used to, the car going up through the gears and making different noises and so on. So to counteract that, Subaru's built in ratios into the CVT. So it behaves very, very similar to an automatic gearbox. In fact, if you didn't know it was a CVT and nobody told you, you probably would never realize that it's a CVT and not, a normal 8-speed automatic like in a Supra or a whole bunch of other performance cars, okay? So the idea that this car is a WRX, it's a sporting car, and it has a CVT gearbox, but a CVT gearbox is only for Toyota Priuses. What is a Toyota Prius gearbox doing in this rally-inspired WRX is just not true. It's not the same gearbox. It's a completely different design of CVT. They call it a Subaru Performance gearbox because it's oriented toward performance, and it builds in the ratios so that the car gives the messages and has the driving experience that a sporting driver would want. Okay, so there is no negative about getting a CVT gearbox in a Subaru. People make fun of it because the CVT gearbox came out in a Daffodil, which was a tiny little Dutch car in the 60s, and it's in a Prius, and it's generally has been in the past in cars without a whole lot of sporting pretensions, but it's all about the application and the engineering and the software that makes it an enthusiast choice. So Subaru's done all that work. They've matched it to the car. They've matched the ratios to the turbocharged power plant. It works really well, and we'll go out on a drive later and we'll show you that. And frankly, it operates just like a double clutch transmission because the CVT can change gears instantly, just like a double clutch transmission. If you use the paddles on a Porsche PDK or any of the other high-end sports cars, you know that when you hit the downshift, it's just instant. So you can go up and down through the gears, and the RPMs just instantly hit the new level depending on what your gear is on. And this does the same thing. So I would argue, or I think I could make a solid case for saying that it's a more elegant engineering solution to combining the efficiency of a manual gearbox and the convenience of an automatic, rather than going through the trouble of a double clutch transmission that has 2 input shafts and 2 clutches and is an inherently bigger, heavier, more complex gearbox that doesn't achieve any more than this one with 2 cones with variable ratios with a belt in between them. Like, I think if you think about it, well, that does the same job, and it does it easier with fewer pieces and so on. Okay, so I would say that from an engineering standpoint or an enthusiast standpoint, have a closer look at this application of a CVT gearbox in this car, and then make up your mind whether you think it's suitable for the car. Because I think if you actually get into it a little bit, you realize that it is. Somebody who's probably done a better job of explaining that than I is the guy who runs this YouTube channel, Engineering Explained. He does actually a really good job of explaining this, and in fact test drives the car. Okay. This one has under, I think, 29,000 kilometers. It looks, virtually brand new. It's a local one-owner car. It was serviced. The next service isn't to 35,000 kilometers, so you're not servicing it for a while. We still have lots of life on the tires, and the brakes are maybe showing 20% wear. If that's the tires, let's just have a look at that. There is at least 50% on the tires on the front, if not more, 60 or 65. And on the rear, I would say about the same thing. I would call it for maybe 60% remaining on the tires, 20% remaining on the brakes. Next service isn't to 35,000 kilometers. It's only at 29,000 kilometers. The car had a little bit of hail damage, and we'll show you the invoice for that. Never been in an accident. It was in the wrong place at the wrong time. All in all, a decent example of a great value performance car in a great color that should be just a little bit more than basic transportation, a little bit more fun than that. You've got a sporting car with a sporting chassis, high performance rubber. You've got quite a bit, I think, more power than you'd normally get in a car of this class. A lot more engaging drive, the unique characteristics of the Boxster engine, a fairly healthy exhaust note. I mean, it's not trying to be quiet, and all wrapped up in a reliable Japanese car. So I think it like I said, it works as an only car when you need something to drive every day, but you want to carry your kids and do your grocery runs and take your friends places and so forth. It makes an excellent skiing car, or outdoor car. A roof rack or a roof box on it going skiing makes a lot of sense. It makes a great winter car in Calgary. Some aggressive winter tires on it, and you could plow through just about anything in this car. A lot of fun in the winter. A lot of cars may have four-wheel drive, but if the electronic controls just shut off all the power the minute any wheel starts to spin, it's no fun at all, because the car the minute it starts to slide, it just stops the car. Where the Subaru, it's been tuned for enthusiast driving, so the car will move around a little bit and you can experiment with it in the snow. Like, it'd be a really fun car to go out on a snow road and play around with. And Subaru for 20 years has made a fun four-wheel drive enthusiast car. And this is the fourth generation. Okay, so with that, Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, and this car is for sale. Thank you for viewing.